Hello, my name is Alex from the Advent Labeler Company. We're going to demonstrate an Advent 310 for ASCO. We received your labels in containers. Your labels were not on a 3-inch core, so we had to wind them onto a 3-inch core. Obviously, that's very important to use any type of labeling machinery. Some of the labels bubbled off the liner. I tried to reattach them, but it should work fine. You've got to make sure they're nice and tight. And they should be if you took them off a roll of labels. So I'm just going to go ahead and set up the machine. So this is the Advent 310. I'm taking out the rollout tray. And then I'm going to go ahead and take out the mandrel. Let me go ahead and do that. Lift up on the brake arm. Lift up on, just pops out really easily. Everything's usually thumb locks or just an Allen wrench tool to make your adjustments. So I'm going to slide on the roll of labels. This is a small roll, so I just want to make sure it goes on nice. You can use the guide to help push it on. Just like that. That was a tight core. But the most important thing is you want to make sure that the labels, the roll is nice and secure. Okay, and it doesn't slip, else that defeats the brake arm. So go ahead and put the roll of labels back in. Just put the shaft inside the hole, and then it just falls into the open frame on the opposite side. Okay, and then usually when you want to feed the labels, you want to disconnect the brake arm spring. Just like that. Okay, now it's released and you can feed the labels easily. I'm going to go ahead and feed the labels through the machine. Now this is a standard 310, except it does have the hot stamp coder bracketry. The machine functionally is exactly the same, but it just has the longer legs and the frame for the hot stamp, the optional hot stamp coder. So that's the only visual difference, but it's fed the exact same way. Normally you would have a hot stamp coder right here that would code the labels in line, which is a really nice feature. It doesn't require air. I'm going to feed the labels through the machine. Goes through all these support rollers. Goes towards the front of the machine. It just goes underneath and then to the front. And it just goes underneath this idler roller and above the pinch roller. And we have these spacers here. We want to make sure those are out while you're feeding the machine. And this is when you should take off a couple labels. Take out the peel bar. This is where the label is separated. Thank you for catching that. Go forward again. Pull forward. Take your peel bar. Make sure it's the sharp edge is facing up and towards the back of the machine. Drop it back into place. Just fits into these two notches right here. I like to make a little point. You can turn on the machine, and then you put it in between the two rollers, the 4-inch dry roller and the 8-inch pinch roller. That's where all the work is done on the machine. You can see it kind of grabs it. And you can just hit the trigger and feed the label out. You can see how it's now a little peel bar. And you're just feeding enough of the label material so it's redirected towards the bottom to the rewind. This is the mechanical rewind. It has a mechanical clutch right here. And it has a slit in the rewind mandrel. All you have to do, it goes in one way, very easy. Just put it into the little cutout. And you just want to wrap it around at least once. Take this as an opportunity. Peel off the label if you want. Okay. Now before I start feeding the labels, you want to reattach the brake arm spring. So that keeps good tension on the label, so you get a nice good stretch as it's wrapped around the container. And also prevents excess labels from feeding on the container. It acts as a brake. and turn on the machine. You can see when I grab the label, there's good tension there. You can see the liners immediately pulled up by the rewind. Okay. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is now I'm going to set the timer on the machine. The timer is essentially the pre-feed for the labeler. The concept is because the container is always rotating, we just need enough of the label to hit the rotating container, and then the spinning motion will pull that label on and get a good stretch. So if I'm set to 0, I don't get any pre-feed. And generally the rule of thumb is you want about 30 to 50% of the label to be pre-fed. It's not an exact adjustment. So generally an adjustment between 3 and 5 is going to work perfect. I might increase it a little bit more. Go ahead and pull that label out and test it again. And that looks perfect. And the nice thing about doing that too is when you feed out a couple labels, it gets everything centered up. So you take out any left to right movement on the webbing. So that's the feeding. Very, very simple. Okay. Next thing we're going to do now is actually set it up for the container. So I could go ahead and put my rollout plate back in. This fits into place very easily. Okay. Then what I'm going to go ahead and do is, because this is a clear container, it's very easy to set this up. I just look to see where my label is going. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust my carriage. Carriage allows me to adjust for different diameter containers. It can go up from about a gallon all the way down to about a 1-inch diameter container. All right. And so you just adjust it so the container is supported by both sets of rollers and it's not hitting the peel bar. And I usually want to be about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch away from the peel bar. It's not an exact adjustment. Doesn't need to be. All right. Now, once I have that set, I'm going to adjust my rollers. And generally, for most containers, you just have solid rollers across. One of the neat things about any of the Advent labelers is we have this fully adjustable carriage system. That's really important because when you have high points like you do on this container, it's very important that you could clear them. Because if you have a high point, a rubber tire hitting one of these high points, it will make the container go on or tilt it, or will prevent it from doing it. It will support it from the outside, and you won't have any rubber tire contact where the label needs to go. So it won't go on nice and tight. So that's a very important feature and kind of what sets apart the Advent machines. Okay. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is the rule of thumb is generally when you have a recessed area, just match your rollers to the webbing. And you can see I need to move it over a little bit. So just take my Allen wrench tool with comes with the machine. And you could toggle the machine on and off, or you could just rotate it by hand. You can see we have set screws here. And I'm going to go ahead just spread these out. And I'm going to move one of these out because I want to give myself a little bit of clearance from the webbing. So if I need to make fine tuning, it's easier when you have a little bit of clearance with your support rollers. You don't want it to be right up against the ridge because you might have to move it left or right. Okay. And then we can move these out of the way. Make sure, just take my guide. And make sure you tighten them up against the flat. It's very important. And you can see here. See, we're right there. We have nice clearance. We have about 1/4 of an inch on either side, which is it should be perfect. Okay. I can go ahead and tighten up my guides. These are my product placement guides. While I have it sighted in, you want a little bit of clearance. You don't want them too tight. Okay. Now we just need to check our front. And looks like the fronts are a little bit off. You can see how that's interfering, and that's causing the container to go on or be crooked. So I'm going to go ahead and move that in. Very easy. Just turn on the machine and use your Allen wrench tool to push the roller over. You can see we have clearance now. Looks great. All right. And if you need to, we have the trigger, which is fully adjustable too, so we can move that left and right. Gives you complete flexibility. All right. Now the overhead pressure arm, this is an unfilled, use it, which is a standard feature on the Advent machines. So the way to adjust it is to loosen up your middle arm. And now you can slide it left and right. And generally the rule of thumb is to have it in the center line of where the label is going to be applied. Now before I tighten it up, I go to the stop on the side. Make myself about an eighth of an inch to a quarter of an inch space away from this frame, and then I tighten it up. And the reason why we do that is that prevents the arm from falling down all the way. So we don't need to lift it up each and every time. It just lifts up, and then it gets the full weight of the arm pressing down on the container. Very, very nice feature. So now we're ready to start labeling. So usually I take a single container and I just put it in and see where the label's going to go. Okay. Now you can see right here, the label went on too low. It hit the ridge. It still went on fairly well, but obviously you don't want that to happen because it's going to flare up. So how do you adjust it? Very, very simple. Just take your thumb locks on your guides and just take one side, move it the appropriate amount you want to. That kind of helps sight everything. And then you just move the other guide. And I could take that same container and just drop it in. That looks pretty good. Maybe a little bit too high. If I want to fine tune it, just move it back down. Oops, I'm sorry, I went the wrong way. Okay, so I'm going to move it. Just take my guide, not too tight. A little play. Do it one more time. I think that's dead on. And there's always going to be a little bit of movement, usually about a 1/16 of an inch to an eighth of an inch, depending on how much wobble your container has. So that's why we always recommend when you get your labels made up, always give yourself some clearance from the ridges or the recessed area. It's very important. Usually we recommend at least a 1/16 of an inch on either side. Okay. So what we're all set up. And now we're going to do the speed test. Now the key to this is to see how fast the machine will go. And part of the machine's actually going to put on the label very fast. You can see when I drop a container in there, usually it takes about a second for the label to go on. So the key is going to be how quickly the operator can get the containers into the machine and fed. So I'm going to go ahead and start doing that. I'm going to go ahead. You can see the 310, this is one of the unique features of the machine, because you don't have to handle the container again. So you can just push it through. Yeah, you put two hands and just let it approach the rollers, and it kind of just grabs it on my hand and guides itself into place. see if I didn't have to reach in the box, I could probably go just a tad faster. But this will give you an accurate idea of how the machine works. This is the last container. And of course, you don't have to push it through. You can also take it out, which is great for containers that are large, like 1 gallon containers or wine bottles. It still gives you that flexibility of working with a variety of containers. Just like that. As accurate as could be, no bubbles, no wrinkles, on extremely tight, looks fantastic. That's the Advent 310. If there are any questions, we reach at 800-846-7716. Thank you.